FemTech Real Money Talks.
Welcome to this edition of FemTech Real Money Talks, the go-to podcast where the pulse of FemTech beats loudest. I'm your host, Yelena Libilina. I'm the founder of Visible Sports, and each episode we dive deep into the world of fundraising for FemTech startups. Join us as we explore how companies at various stages in diverse markets and countries navigate their fundraising journeys. We're thrilled to spotlight female founders and engage with a lineup of investors, fundraising experts, and key players from accelerators, VCs, research agencies dedicated to FemTech. Get ready for our today's insightful conversation with Rachel Bartholomew, and she's the founder of Hyivy Health, a startup that creates the first remote monitoring and therapeutic system for pelvic floor and gynecological conditions. But also, as far as I know, you're the head of Femtech Canada and Femtech across borders. So let us dive right in. I mean, we normally ask our guests about their startup journeys, like how and why their startups came to life, and normally it is, it is some personal story, sometimes not, but of course I'm more interested in what stands behind the Hyivy. Like, how did it come to be?
Yeah, so I was working in the innovation ecosystem and entrepreneurship ecosystem for many years. I had a startup company previously. I worked in incubators. I taught entrepreneurship at universities. So I was dabbling in all of the different kind of ways to go through startup journeys. I was running an incubator at the time at a university. My term came up and I was essentially diagnosed with cervical cancer 2 weeks after leaving that job. That was kind of like, okay, this is going to be your full-time job for the next little bit, is going through treatment. And so I was 28 years old at the time. I went through an open abdominal hysterectomy, and then shortly after didn't get the greatest pathology back and got subsequent treatment. And when I went through that treatment, I was told that I was going to get this medical device, which was awesome. I was like, really cool. Can't wait to use it. I go up to the pharmacy and they hand me a glass test tube. And essentially they tell me, insert this glass test tube every other day for 5 years. And that was really what I found out was standard of care in this industry for women who went through radiation, through their cancer journeys. And then I found out it wasn't just cancer, it was all sorts of different indications. And there's been a little bit of innovation in that they've made it plastic now and they've made it pink, which I don't know how that helps anybody, but essentially that's as much as of what has happened in this industry. And I was like, okay, somebody can innovate on this a little bit better. And so through my kind of time on bed rest and just taking time to heal and get my feedback, under me post-cancer, I decided to start Hyivy. And I really used my cancer treatments as a way to validate, both clinically and with other patients that I was sitting in the rooms with, the idea that we want an upgraded dilator. And furthermore, we want better treatment opportunities, and we want to be able to measure and understand the impacts of what we're creating, and then what we're actually doing with this therapy, because most doctors just don't understand it. So we created Hyivy. This was about 4 years ago. So we've been on a really interesting journey. Really looking at medical papers that exist currently that are very limited in the data that has been collected in this area, let alone in chronic condition management, and trying to figure out how do we fill those data gaps with our own research? How do we create a product that completely reinvents the way that we think about an intravaginal device? How do we then create something that can be integrated into clinics effectively? Yeah, so that's what we've been working on in the last 4 years.
I mean, that's an incredibly powerful story. And I mean, it's hard for me to find the words to express what I'm feeling, about the story that you've just told me, because I unfortunately had a lot of experience with cancers in my own family, and I know how unimaginably tough this journey is, especially with the chemo and all the procedures, and how, like, my mom had breast cancer, and she's unfortunately, I mean, the first breast cancer she was a survivor of, and the second, unfortunately, she wasn't. And one of the main problems and one of the main issues that she's had was the doctor negligence, and this, the I mean, I understand the pressures that, doctors are facing. There are so many patients, there are so many stories, and there are so many things that they need to do that they just don't have time. And, the capacity of the public health system is very limited, and I understand that. But the fact that, half of her medical records kept being lost, simply the procedures that she got, that she gets prescribed, they also were like super different, super non-transparent, super not optimized for the type of condition that she's had. So to continue that, the kind of mental state she was in. So what I mean is, like, I applaud your strengths. I applaud how much you've been able to achieve and how much you've turned the page around, actually. So it is honestly incredible, and I'm sure you're already proud of yourself, but I'm incredibly honored to hear the story and to be able to sit with you in one studio. It means absolutely a lot, and it's definitely an inspiration. Can you tell me about, can you tell me a little bit about the fundraising journey, and also the fact, something that you've mentioned about being the university accelerator? Did it help you, set up Hyivy, or did it not? Did you tap into, like, any resources, any connections you might have made in the course of this journey, and did it help with the fundraising or not? So anything you can share on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I think I had been in the ecosystem for quite a while, right? And so where I'm located in Kitchener-Waterloo area, we're considered what we call the Silicon Valley of the North. So we are really for engineering excellence here in Canada and kind of North America. So, we have a really strong network here. And so through my work with my first startup, through the work that I did with the universities, that type of thing, I really entrenched myself into knowing who's who in the zoo kind of thing. And I was really able to leverage that into creating a new company. I don't know if I would be as willing and able to create another company if I didn't have a good backbone and support of the community. So I think, if anything, the network and that entrenching into the community is so important when you're going out to raise money or even just to start a business. I think doing it alone, you live in a silo in comparison to getting exposure when you go out and you entrench yourself into a startup community. So that's why they exist. And I think that's why everybody should be taking advantage of them. This is my second go at it, right? My first go at it, I got to acquisition, but it wasn't like the most beautiful exit on the planet. And I learned
How would you define the most beautiful exit on the planet, by the way? What's your measure of it? I want to hear. I want to hear. That's a great term.
Yeah. I mean, I say the most beautiful in the sense that, like, I am not like laying on the beach in, Saint Tropez and like living an Instagram lifestyle. Let's just put it that
Okay,
way.
all right.
It's I learned a lot, and I think, like, it's one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, you can learn a lot, but like, is money in the bank is like a whole other discussion, right? I broke even. I made my money back, so I think that was a big piece of it. Um, and I think I learned a lot that I've now used in this next stage. There's so many things. So I didn't raise money in that first company with VCs and investors and angels. I raised it through grants and then got it through revenue. But it was a SaaS product, so very, very different and in a non-regulated area in automotive specifically. And it was different, but at the same time, there were so many lessons through the acquisition cycle, working with corporate, early revenue, managing customer expectations, sales, all of these things that I totally messed up on in the first time around. And when I started this company, I said, I am going to do everything opposite that I did in the first time around. And I think the first thing that I did was I made sure that I could tell every single person about what I was working on, whoever would listen to me. I think we always say, like, keep your cards close to your chest. I did not take that pathway whatsoever with this company. I mean, I protected my IP very, very early on so that I could be able to do that. But I really, I really wanted to build that network, build that community around the product, get the feedback I can get, instantly. That feedback is priceless. Like, A, it doesn't cost you any money to pay for that feedback. And B, it can come back to you tenfold in the value that it provides for your company. So, if we look at it as a value exchange, it really, really is worth it. And so the first day we got the crappiest prototype developed in PowerPoint using clip art. We went out and started pitching this and talking to people about it. And that was something I didn't do with my first company that I wish I, would have done. And so, that really led to building early value in the company to be able to go out and raise money on top of the network and everything else that I had created throughout my journey of my career. So I think, ultimately that all kind of snowballed on top of each other, no Canadian pun intended, that, we were able to then leverage that into our fundraising journey.
That's great. A snowball reference reminds me of my days in Syracuse. What fundraising stage are you at now? Or who were your first investors? Who are your current investors? And how are you, what's the model like? And, how are you what are your plans for fundraising?
Yeah, for sure. So, oh my goodness, fundraising is like not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. I will be honest. I think none of us really truly know what we're doing when we're going out and fundraising. Really, it is all just a complete messy, show at the end of the day. I wasn't going to swear in that, but definitely wanted to. So yeah, I raised a pre-seed round back in 2021, and we all know what happened in 2021. Was everyone was sitting on their cash from COVID. Everyone was like itching to do stuff. We always say, throwing spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks.
Yeah. Spaghetti.
So money was flying everywhere.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So, I raised money in 2021 at the height of VC fundraising, which smart. I'm glad I did it. Off of a concept and some early prototype and not really knowing what I was doing still. And, could I do that now? Heck no, there's no way I would be able to do that now, just with the way that the industry has kind of settled down. But I went about it smart. I did a lot of the legals up front. I didn't do safes. I did convertible notes. I really worked with my investors to get everything properly set up in a way that would be, friendly for both sides, right? Like really taking into account that this is a marriage and we're getting into bed together, and it's going to be a long-term process of being in bed together, and we've got to be able to cooperate. So I went through that process.
Yeah. Can I ask you a follow-up question? Why did you go through convertible notes as opposed to safes? What was the rationale behind it?
Yeah, there was a couple things. So I think the first thing is, in Canada, we're not as tolerant of safes as we are of convertible notes. Investors like to see a lot of that kind of valuation work done up front. I wanted to put a valuation on it because I knew where we were heading and how that would grow and how that would look on paper. So it was kind of a future fundraising activity in conjunction with that. And yeah, I wanted to make sure to do things right up front. I put in the work for the legal side to be able to do those notes instead. So yeah, so that's really why we did convertible notes to begin with, and really fair valuation. We didn't go anything crazy. And yeah, we raised 1.3 million Canadian on that pre-seed round. And that got us about 2 years of work, which was really good because in medical device, you always add a year to your timeline, if not two. So it's very much like you think it'll be a year, it's actually going to be two. And so it really helped us kind of bridge us to what would be the seed round. Now, the seed round was a completely different beast. You're coming into this in what we call the valley of death. right? You've made significant progress, but you've spent a lot of money, but your progress is not good enough to get the big dollars, the big bucks, right? Investors are always like, okay, I want to invest, but I just need that much more, right? And I know that this becomes a thing into Series A and beyond when you're in revenue numbers and they go, well, I want to see your revenue numbers be just that much more, right? So it's very like we talk about in Canada, and I don't know if it's like this around the world. I'm sure it's very similar. That seed is really where, companies can go to die because you just don't have that much, you just don't have enough to be able to convince people to invest in you.
Why do you think investors do that? Is it common greed, or is it like why do they like to push you just a little notch, like a little bit further? Is this, a common VC mentality, or get a squeeze for your buck kind of thing?
Possibly. I mean, there's so many factors that play into that, right? Like I was going to share that when we started our seed raise was pretty much right when Silicon Valley Bank blew up. And like worst timing I could have possibly picked ever. I had started kind of doing some build up to it as you do. You get everything prepared, you get your due diligence room, you're getting a feel, the market's cooling off a bit, but then all of a sudden, oh, now all of the investors lost their money because the bank blew up, right? So there was a little bit of trickle effect. And then it was this constant, are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? And when I was going through business school and I was learning about like the pestle analysis, which is like the political, economic, social, evaluations of the market, I go, who cares about socially what's happening or economically what's happening? Oh my gosh, you don't realize how much politics, economics, all of this stuff plays into. And now you're stuck watching like CNN every single day going, is my company going to survive? Right? It's crazy. So, we went through so much turmoil in the last little bit between war, between political changes, between economics and COVID recovery and all of these things that have just completely messed up the fundraising environment. So we have seen so many companies fall, right? We have seen so many companies take massive hits on valuation, right? So I think part of it is, investors are protecting their own interests, right? We know that investors, because of recession, because of economics, because of all of these things, are actually feeling as much pressure as we are. We forget that most of the investors we turn to, if they're not private wealthy individuals, often are investing money of others. And where does that money come from? It comes from bigger family offices, they're LPs, right? So those LPs can say, I'm making the capital call or not. So I saw a lot of investors changing their strategies because the pressure that everybody else is feeling through this whole entire process. So just as much as we're feeling pressure as companies, they're feeling pressure as investors. So they're not immune to any of this either. That affects, okay, well, can I get a deal? Was the valuation inflated from the initial point, right? How can I cut this to make this work for my portfolio? Or do I take a pause completely on investing and only invest in the companies that I have invested in to make sure that they stay alive, right? So a lot of that was factoring into what was happening. And so our first fundraise took about 9 months. So a small child, right? And the second time around, it was about 18 months of fundraising, and it is still ongoing. Like we're still kind of scraping out what we can. We raised 2.1 million. That is 3 million short of what I really needed. So, it's kind of like a perpetual fundraise at this point. I'm just constantly looking for money. And I think everyone's kind of feeling that same pressure right now. Luckily, we got a valuation bump up, and luckily we had a lot of our current investors invest back in plus new investors. So it looks good on both sides. And yeah, we just didn't get enough to do what we inspired to do. So you have to pivot and you have to change strategy and get a little bit more scrappy. And that's really the strategy that we've taken. And I was lucky enough to get a term sheet that converted all my notes. So went into pref shares and was able to convert everyone to equity, which was fantastic because I know not everybody gets that luxury. So, but it's been a journey. I cannot say that it's been easy by any capacity.
Yeah, no, it sounds incredible. And again, like I have to say this, very, very inspiring because I feel like the picture you're painting is very balanced, if I'm allowed to use this linguistic form. But you're not taking just one side. You're also showing us and highlighting the what it feels like on the other side, on the side of the investors. Because I'm not immune to sometimes painting the investors in a worse light than they really are, and I sometimes do forget they also have to fundraise, and they really have to go through the same commotions as the startups do. And it's interesting, the model and the strategy of the fundraising strategy that you've taken. So as far as I understand, you have a medical device, right? So it's Hyivy is a medical device, and that's normally from even by the episodes that we've recorded so far, the founders of startups with medical devices normally go through the grant route, right? And they normally attach themselves to the national public health systems, which makes perfect sense, right? So, which kind of precludes them, like they spend this grant money on patents. And I was also curious to know, like, how much of your fundraising did go into patents, if you patented at all. So I am curious, why did you decide to pursue this particular strategy of going into the VC funding? And how does this make your journey different? Right?
Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head in terms of hardware is hard, right? Hardware has longer pathways. It is more costly upfront. It is, and then layer in regulations and you've just shot yourself in the foot, right? And you are not every investor's cup of tea, right? It is tough. So convincing someone that putting their money into something that is going to take that like 3 times as long to get to market and see ROI, like, you think about it from an investor perspective, no wonder everybody loves B2B SaaS. They could just like code a little thing in their basement and then go out and whatever. I know it's not that easy, but, but there is a stickiness factor. And I think so part of this whole journey is A, you got to find the right investors. B, you got to get creative in who you look for, right? And our cap table is made up of a very, very interesting hodgepodge of all sorts of different types of investors. We've got pharma to medical device companies to adjacent, potential partner companies to distributors to oncologists and doctors to random angels who believe in the story to VCs that heavily invest in healthcare. Like, we went for everything and anything in between, because as that transitions out, you see who is willing to lean in and who is not willing to lean in. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is VCs will be your most fickle. Angels will be your biggest champions and will make sure to try to provide you with as much resources as possible. And corporate, even though you can get locked into some legal stuff that may not be as preferential moving forward, they're the ones who will bail you out, right? Those are the ones that are going to be the deep pockets that are willing to continue to invest because they have as much of a vested interest as you do. And, I think they ultimately look at it as M&A pipeline and all the rest of it, right? So I think that's a big piece of this. And I recommend, I recommend getting a big mix and trying all angles. I always recommend never, ever, ever put non-dilutive on the back burner. Non-dilutive should always be your top priority, no matter what. And we always say that women will self-select themselves out of applying for a job if they don't hit all the markers. So I took the approach of I am not going to be a woman when I apply for grants. I don't care if I hit 5% of this. I'm still going to apply. I'm going to try to see how I can make it work and see if I can get this. It's free money. So, we've finally surpassed the total amount that we've raised from VCs versus the amount we've raised non-dilutive. But I always try to keep them at par. I raise the same amount of money from investors that I do with non-dilutive. And I continue to keep that balance. And I'm starting to get strategic with how I'm doing that, and that I'm opening subsidiaries in other countries to now take advantage of their non-dilutive funding for activities that we would be doing anyways in those countries.
That's good.
I think what I have, yes, I think what I have failed in my fundraising journey has been I have had US and European investors from the very beginning, but not enough. And I think I really wish I would have built my network of investors earlier on in different countries, because I have a lot of Canadian investors on my cap table and those who've continued to support me. But you get to a point, usually post seed into the seed, depending on how much you're raising, that you almost eliminate the ability, you've tapped those investors thin. Like you can no longer utilize those investors because you need the bigger guns, or you need the bigger checks, or you need to have that bigger reach. And I wish I would have built up my US and my EU networks a bit better through that process, because now what I'm doing is building it now, trying to expand what my cap table reach looks like in order to be able to have better expansive network that can be provided through investment, but also make the money go farther in the capacity that it's they can do follow on that is larger checks as the stakes get higher down the road. So yeah, that's been a little bit of my journey.
I love how detailed you are, because like what you were saying, like I wish I could literally take it down for myself, like do this and do that. How did you reach out? Like walk me through the day of fundraising of a femtech startup founder. We have never done it in the episode, but walk me through. Okay.
Oh my goodness. It is like there is no process at all.
Okay.
It is cold emails to warm intros to LinkedIn pings to schmoozy, Christmas parties to everything in between. Once again, I think the biggest thing for me in my pre-seed round was network, right? I was a little baby and my Hyivy was my little baby. It was like my little ugly baby that nobody actually thought was like cute, right? So, you got to kiss a lot of frogs before you get your prince. And so, for us, we got the term sheet that ultimately raised our pre-seed round through a network called Creative Destruction Lab. An amazing network of people across the globe who are I like to say it's almost a little bit cult-like, but in a good way. And that it is this really tight network that if you can get in and you can stay in, because there's a process to be able to stay in, you can really tap that network for the best it can provide you. And it's got a lot of investors in there. And so what happened was we had an amazing investor who was championing us and shouting from the rooftops for us and put that term sheet on the table and helped us get legally cleaned up. And it kind of created a FOMO domino effect in that we had more investors come on board. As soon as you get your term sheet, things become a lot easier because there is FOMO, right? So your big push is term sheets. And really that's going to come. I find term sheets come from people you build really, really close connections with and work on your relationship. It doesn't come from like random Joe Schmo who you meet, or reach out to cold. It takes a while to build that relationship. And so, because they're putting their name on the line as much as you need them, right? In terms of putting that term sheet forward. So you got to be good, right? You got to look good for them. And, they're putting their name on the line for that. So that is how that kind of facilitated reaching out to angel networks, doing the deal processes that they have in place. I've got lots of little tools that I use. So things like openvc.app, Delium, all of these different tools that allow you to push your name out there in a more warm lead style way. You leverage. I don't know if I recommend this strategy for everybody, but I've been a part of, I think, 54 incubators and accelerators now. And like, not all of them are good. And I would say I don't put 100% effort into all of them, but I was able to then leverage those accelerators and say, hey, can you connect me to X? Or who do you have that's kind of pinged you and said, hey, we're interested in some of your startups. Can you intro me? So that has been another really big thing. And then I do a lot of these venture forum kind of things. They can really be hit or miss. And I've had a lot more misses than hits and successes in these, like, Resi, come to our investor forum, pitch on stage, get people interested. Like, it really doesn't happen that way. It can be a little bit more tricky in that perspective. So, our time is as valuable as their time. So be careful when you commit large dollars to these big events that promise investor connections, and, can they actually happen? I don't know. It's one of those things. So that's kind of how I've done it. I'm doing cold outreach now. Obviously, it's not that successful. Everything now is warm lead based, and it really comes down to being in your community and making those connections through people.
That's true. No, I mean, what it is, if it's not a community based effort, then like, especially when you were talking about angel investors who champion for you, and that's I think it's actually quite incredible to gain this trust from the person, and I agree that you need to build this relationship. And I also understand that, in a very fast pace, you need to see each other as people, right? Even though, like, your common goal is to earn money, and to build a successful business. And each of you has what the other one doesn't. But speaking about networks, actually, it's a quite it's a natural kind of switch of the gear towards your other hats that you're wearing, and that is, the Femtech Across Borders NGO, Femtech Canada, right? So could you tell me more about that, and could you tell me how how it's functioning, why you created that, and what you have achieved so far or haven't, and what you're planning to achieve? What's that all about?
So FemTech Canada was actually born out of my fundraising process from Hyivy. So when I went out for my pre-seed round, what I noticed was I was being asked questions in a way that my other life sciences friends were not being asked. And I was very confused about it. And I mean, we all hear about this, that women, get asked different questions when they're fundraising than men do. But then add in a layer of, like, we're talking about something that is like a scary dildo looking thing, right?
Oh my God.
That goes in a vagina.
Wait. No. Bring it back. Wait. This is the first time, podcast, the startup founder has actually brought, the functioning product. So strike back. We'll get back to the network. Tell us how it works.
Okay.
Please do tell us how it works.
Yeah, so this is our Hyivy Flora device. This is V1 of the device that's currently in clinical trials. So this has 2 sensor elements and 2 therapeutic elements into it. So this is inserted here. This kind of wraps around the body. Your legs wrap around here, so the control panel is kind of facing you, and you can see the status of your therapy. And then we have 2 air balloons that inflate and are measured through pressure. 2 heating bands that heat up to a gentle therapeutic heat with a temperature sensor at the tip. Through this therapy, we're seeing by session 4 already trending downwards in progress, so patients really recovering well. But we're also seeing data that's showing us all sorts of really interesting stuff that went from therapeutic progress to potential diagnostics. So that's kind of where we're going in the pipeline. But yeah, here's our.
That's amazing. Hi, Ivy.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yes.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, going out and pitching something, as a woman, and then as an idea around vaginas that, most of the people who are sitting across the table from me don't have. And won't understand the problems that we're trying to solve intimately. We got asked different questions, and there was a couple steps in between around validation and education that other life sciences companies I don't think were experiencing. And so I was like, okay, is it just me, or is it other femtech companies? And I can't talk to my American friends because my American friends have a completely different fundraising landscape. Where are my Canadian friends? And my Canadian friends in femtech. And so over an Easter long weekend, I researched who was making femtech in Canada. I put them all in the Slack channel and reached out to them. I made a funny little, like, really poorly made Canva.
Exactly.
I made a really bad graphic of the 51 companies that I found working in across Canada and where they were located. And I just shared it on LinkedIn. And that created this snowball effect. And what happened was we started with these 51 companies and we were just supporting each other in Slack and meeting like once a month. That morphed into a regional innovation center. So we have these things called RICs, regional innovation centers in Canada, that are located in these specific regions where there's like innovation hubs happening, and they are funded by the government to support innovation activity. And so here where I'm located, Kitchener-Waterloo is an amazing innovation hub, but has no roots in medical. We have no medical school here. Our hospitals are satellite hospitals. It's not as robust. So, and I was actually treated in a place called Hamilton, which is south of Kitchener-Waterloo, but in between KW and Toronto. And they have a massive hospital network called Hamilton Health Sciences. And they have this innovation center called Innovation Factory. And funny enough, this woman who had done work in Africa in women's health, all these things, I met through passing. We kept in touch. She said, hey, I'm moving to this region. And I said, hey, you should get a job at Innovation Factory. I don't hear her for a couple months. And then she goes, hey, just so you know, I'm now hired here and I'm working. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. And so she comes to me and she goes, hey, would you want to work with us to help operationalize Femtech Canada? And I was like, yes, I'm dying. I'm doing this on top of my startup. Like, please help me. And so I partnered with this regional innovation center who has put money towards operationalizing this from their own pockets, like their own federal government pockets. And that has grown our network from 51 companies to start to 165. We're the third largest femtech ecosystem next to the US and the UK, now globally. And, we have now done so many different things, from hackathons with universities to coming and presenting to researchers, to hosting investor events, to national town halls around women's health and femtech. We are starting to get huge momentum here in Canada. We've had 54% year-over-year growth in number of companies, and it's just been incredible. And so from a funding perspective, we've got our first corporate sponsor. It's an insurance company here in Canada. We went forward and put forward a $100 million ask to the federal government to fund women's health in Canada. What happened with Femtech Across Borders was I said, okay, we got really good momentum with Femtech Canada. We've created, alongside some of these other players like Femtech France and Impact 51 in Israel, and Brit and everything she's done with Femtech Focus in the US and Femtech Lab in the UK. What can we do now to do this across the globe? And so I was working with Impact 51 at the time when we created the idea for Femtech Across Borders. Unfortunately, they had to take a step back because of everything that's happening in Israel. But we were able to pull together, I think it was like 20 countries at the time, in a room, and we just started meeting with each other. And what happened was that also started to snowball. You create it, it kind of comes. And Ida Tin, who's like the founder of the term Femtech and kind of our mother of everything.
The episode just came out.
Yes. So she really is like the groundwork for everything. She just like keeps finding and what's happened is we're now in 80 countries.
Okay.
But how do we meet every other month? How do we set these community groups, these nonprofits, up for success with the layout of how we all have all done it already? Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel because we're not competitive with each other. We are here to support each other in growing the network that is Femtech with a consistent, brand for Femtech, a consistent vision. And our hopes is now that we're getting the foundation of all of these countries set up and the momentum starting, how do we get them funded through the government? How do we get corporates involved? How do we get money flowing for our companies and our innovators? How do we start to change the narrative socially for women's health impacts overall? How do we pull in groups like the UN and the Gates Foundation to look at some of the glaringly obvious gaps? And my biggest thing is next year, my goal for FemTech Across Borders is how do we understand what are the key challenges in each country in women's health? How do we collectively pull that data together? How do we support each other in these things? So for instance, we were kind of part of the helm of creation of Femtech Ukraine. Femtech Ukraine dealing with war similarly to how Israel's dealing with war. And the Israeli group had done some work on war and trauma in women's health. How can we bridge those connections? So how can I bridge companies that are dealing with the similar large scale issues to solve problems collectively together? And then my hopes, and something we had already started to noodle a bit, is doing Femtech exchanges. So Canadians go to Israel, Israelis come to Canada, they learn about each other's countries, how they can grow their companies and export and go beyond that. So those are the two other entities.
I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah. And it sounds, throughout this podcast, it sounds exactly what is needed at this point, because there are lots of amazing startups, there are lots of initiatives, but there is not enough. For the industry that is, I would say, is teeming with issues that needs resolving, and also that is very capital ready. There is not enough infrastructure. There is not enough, there's not enough of a support net. There is not enough of a concerted effort. And this is exactly what you're doing. And on top of your startup, which is even more incredible. I just need to applaud to that. And I just, my question would be like, how can we help? What can we do to contribute to this mission and to make it even, larger, better, faster, whatever term you might use. The thing is, we are all trying to make a community, and you're already making it global. So the thing is, for us, it's important. How can we help?
You're doing it right now, right? It's elevating voices. It's highlighting the work that's being done. It's promoting that. And I think I think the piece is I'm really good at herding cats. Like really in reality, I am a great shepherd. And I like to, I guess, call myself that. I'm not good at the promo and the outreach and the boasting and the execution of, I could pull the people who can execute, right? But I am not the executor. And I think that is what my superpower is being able to bring everybody to the table. But then that next stage, because really in reality, I don't have the time to be able to get into the nitty gritty of running a podcast or doing the social media or doing the promo or keeping on top of the news or anything like that. I try to do my best, so that's why I need a team of people behind me. And all of this is being done Femtech Canada. I'm not being paid for it, right? Femtech Across Borders, I'm not being paid for it. These things are being done not because I want a paycheck out of it. And I think there's a bigger conversation around health and this is, I like to say that this work is the work that I do to keep myself sane in the fact that my health isn't the greatest. And I've went through a lot of trauma and I've got to deal with it eventually. But right now, how I'm dealing with it is I'm trying to help people in the process. And that's how I'm healing my soul in the process. So, I think finding others, and that's what I found with this community. And that's the beauty of FemTech and women's health is there's not enough of us to go around. So we can't compete because we can't solve 50% of the world's population's stuff with what we have now. So, and I think we all collectively know that. And women are fundamentally at their core collaborators and community builders and fiercely protect their communities and work with their communities. And that is how I know that I can herd the cats, but I know it will morph into something else because I've got this amazing group of people who are just all contributing what they can to be able to push the narrative forward. And we're doing a damn good job. Like, I'm sorry, but I mean, Ida came forward and put forward FemTech as a term. And we've had what, 300% growth,
Yeah.
and we weathered a recession, and we've weathered all of these things. Like, I'm sorry, but like, FemTech community, applause to every single one of you, because we are doing it. We are really truly doing it. We are fighting down such massive walls and barriers, and all of us are just come together and be that collective voice. And that's the biggest thing, is we're not competitive, we're collaborative. But I think most importantly is like, just be in the room, because that then sparks an idea that then morphs into things like this podcast and all these other things that just continues to spread those roots. I think it was Ida who shared the story about mother trees and how we have in a forest, there is these trees that are the big trees that then all are connected through roots and share resources and pull their resources out of their own mother trees into the smaller trees to allow them to grow. That is my true vision of Femtech Canada, right? Get people talking about it. Hopefully every single other person then starts to create their own initiatives. And that's my, thing for Femtech across borders. Like, we've achieved way more success than I ever thought we could. We've created like 15 net new country, pieces. It's just like,
Yeah. No.
everything's happening, and it's so much more than what I could have ever imagined. And I'm so thankful for absolutely every single person who's contributed one small thing, made one small introduction to have created an entire new movement.
Yeah, to movement it is, and that would have been such a beautiful piece and powerful piece to end our podcast with, but there is one more piece we haven't touched upon. It's this initiative, right, from the Canadian government. What I know it might not be something very pleasant, unfortunately, to talk about, but I cannot not ask. So could you tell me more about, what this is and, the whole story?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, it's not all doom and gloom. I think we're just in a very weird time, and I'll kind of highlight it. But so when we were thinking about what we want to do and what we need in Canada to be able to create an ecosystem around women's health that doesn't just include innovation, right? And we looked at what the US was doing, and they initially announced 100 million, that then followed by 600 million. And we go, okay, Canada, it's time. Let's pull up our socks a little bit here. And so I was crazy enough to go, I want 100 million for women's health in Canada, and I'm just going to go knock on the Prime Minister's door and get him to give it to me. And that was my goal, like that, truly. And so I started the journey of government lobbying and going out and learning, how do you get something carved into a budget? And how do you convince parliament and government and ministers, and we didn't just go provincial, we went federal. So we went completely national with this. And what we carved out was 20 million to go to fundamental research, 30 million to go towards innovation and supporting innovation, not through mentorship, because women don't need more mentorship.
They need funding.
They need funding. So through non-dilutive grants that go directly to the things that our 165 members said that they need. Hiring not students, hiring core people who require real salaries, sales bridging so that they can get from point A to point B in making revenue, product development and investment into manufacturing, distribution and procurement. So getting products on shelves and into hospital systems, right? These are just some of the pieces. So, and clinical trial work as well. So clinical research being another big piece. So those were the innovation kind of grant pieces we were looking for, and then wrapping programming around it. And then investment capital. So creating a $50 million VC fund that would essentially invest growth capital into the companies that are who are at the stage now where they're ready to put gasoline on the fire and go. And so we've been knocking down doors, and we've talked to pretty much every ministry now. We've gotten up through every single one of them were giving us thumbs up, loving the idea, loving how everything was positioned, really liked the approach. We didn't get any negative feedback. The problem is we are at the final bit. It'll be less than a year of term of our current prime minister, who is unfortunately not looked at in a great light right now because of COVID and all these other things. And there's a big kind of right wing movement happening in Canada that's kind of underlying all of this. And what's happened is a bunch of people suddenly left office, and his head of finance left office, which is at the announcement of the fall economic statement, which is not good. Like, that is not good. So there's a lot of instability in the government right now. We've laid the groundwork to be able to say, okay, they know what we want. How can we get them what they need to put this into the budget? If an election is called, if anything happens between now and then, we're not getting a budget. We're not getting all of these things because we're going into election cycles. And then money really is not going to flow for another 2 years or so until everything settles and we've got new government in place. So we took a risk. Let's be honest. We took a risk doing this in the final term during a lot of this instability, and our neighbors to the south love you guys to pieces, love our US neighbors, but also don't love you because, like, your politics are crazy. And that political environment affects us as the like little sister up in the north who are like watching this in horror. But it trickles into our mentality as well. And so some of that craziness starts to bridge those borders. And then you have things that start to feel like very unstable, very unsettled, very uncertain. And so that's what we're sitting in right now. And so today is actually a massive cabinet shuffle that's happening, that we're all kind of like waiting to see what happens. Essentially, the prime minister is going to sit back and go, am I resigning? Am I staying in? What is the fight? What is the battle I'm going to be able to battle? And other people can potentially vote in against him and call an election. So there's a lot going on. It has nothing to do with us, but I will say, and I am worried that the alternative government that could get into power is not as feminist and is not as proactive when it comes to these types of things. And I worry that, is there still a narrative? So I'm worried. I'm burnt out, to be honest with you, about the whole thing. I think it's just, there's so much I can't control that I simply can't just sit here and doom scroll, CBC and watch what's happening. We got to kind of just take a step back and say, okay, once the bleeding stops, we'll revisit this and try to figure out a new strategy and a new direction and way. I don't think it's dead. I think it's just, it needs a new re-strategization. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the people we've talked to are probably concerned that will they still have a job rather than what budget cut or what budget additions are going to look like. So yeah, so that's where we're at with that right now. But sign the petition still.
But let me, what you've just told me, based on what you've already covered in this episode, isn't that your normal cycle? I mean, if you look back at what you just told me about, they all started off at a very unfortunate time on the onset, and from the look of it, and you pulled through. Everything fell into pieces based on the fearlessness that you had, based on the type of effort.
Okay, you're gonna make me cry.
No, it's true. That's so true. I'm just listening to that, and I'm able to talk it back to you. You will pull through. You'll pull through because you've gone through so much. I'm gonna cry too. Wait. Okay. You've been through so much. You've beaten so many odds, and you're gonna beat this one as well. It's gonna turn into your favor because this mission is bigger than yourself. And you have this obviously. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna cry too. Yeah,
I know, right?
Yeah. But you've this is your pattern, okay, Rachel? This is your pattern.
Thanks. I mean,
but the thing is, this pattern turns out great in the end. The beating the odds thing is it seems to be your superpower. You think you're saying hurting the cats, beating the freaking odds is your thing. Beat the freaking odds. Yeah. This is exactly what you're doing, and this is it's a huge, humongous thing. And one way or another, Like, nothing you have done is in vain, okay? Nothing you have done is in vain.
Yeah.
From what I'm hearing, it's mind-blowing, and it's going to fall through one way or another, just the same way it did before, okay? You'll just, you just kick back, take one hat, and it's gonna pull through one way or another. Because I don't believe, honestly, like, as a startup founder myself, I'm also lying a little bit in the valley of death. I absolutely believe that nothing we do is in vain as long as we do it. We may seem tons of odds, things we cannot control, things that happen outside of our most pessimistic thinking, okay? But we pull through because we do stuff, okay? We do stuff, and we do stuff that is bigger than us. And we do stuff with the mission that is bigger than us. And if I know anything about this world, it freaking counts, okay? It freaking counts. So what you do counts. Big way, big time. I know it's hard. I know you're exhausted, but we are with you.
Yeah.
We're with you. And we're ready to support you every single step of the way, okay? We're here.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I it's so funny to hear somebody say that with a different perspective, because like I've been so entrenched in the roots of it all, and like, you go, holy crap, like 8 months of work and like so much time and effort, and like it can just disappear overnight. But I know it's not like that. I know it's like the grassroots of what needs to get done. It's just, I think the biggest thing is like, I care so much about women and women's health and pushing this forward, and I see such a huge opportunity that's being missed. And B, I care so much about the companies, and like every single one of them I feel are like my own company, and Femtech Canada, and then Femtech Across Borders, same thing. I feel like every single one of them is like my own little like baby alongside everybody else, right? I care so deeply, and that's why it gets so emotional. And having these hits, it feels like sometimes we're taking 10, and I know that every single person who works in women's health and femtech feels this way. Sometimes it feels like 10 steps back to take one step forward, but we continue to persevere because we know that it needs to be done. But yeah, it's like, can't wait for some holiday.
I agree.
I just want everything to go quiet for a second, and just like let us all take a breath and rethink.
Sure. I mean, we will probably release it later, but still, what would be your address to the Femtech Nation?
I don't even know if I can say it's a wish, because I know it's going to happen anyways. I mean, once again, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx anything, but like, keep pushing forward, keep moving that needle, keep educating, as frustrating as it is. Like, that is truly, I want to just continue to see momentum, and I know I will, because once again, like, applause to the entire community. We are just a bunch of badasses making it happen. And so that's all I can hope for. I hope that there's still a little bit of humanity left, and that some of these bigger political, environmental, cultural things don't take such a huge hit on women and women's health in general. I really hope that we don't take as many steps back as some of us think we might end up taking. And so, it's not so individualized as it is for this greater good of the globe and the world and humanity. But you know what? I'm also like, I'm going to sound so crazy right now. I'm also a huge believer in the stars and astrology and all of these things. And like, we are Age of Aquarius. Pluto is out, and we are in fully, and we're leaning into the Age of Aquarius that is, let's, change the world and make it a better place.
Hell yeah. Getting into astrology would be like another 30-minute bonus episode. I'd love to dive with you. It's going to kill me for that. So, but still, it's a very powerful address, and I love how you put that. I definitely would have been able to say it better myself. But thank you so much for coming, Rachel. And thank you so much for leading this story in these words here with us today. And as I said, and this is my address to, every founder and every stakeholder in this ecosystem listening to this podcast, lean in. Yeah, I would echo you. Lean in and get in touch, support other femtech stakeholders, join Femtech Across Borders, help the way you can, push through develop your business, and just be out there for sure. And may the stars be with you, May the age of Aquarius be with you.
Exactly.
FemTech
I
Real
love
Money
that.
Talks. FemTech Real Money Talks.